and welcome to today's episode of Talk the Talk. My name is Daniel Midgley. For the next hour, we're going to be bringing you language news, language issues, some really great tracks. Hope to hear from you as well. Maybe you've got language questions. Hope you'll bring them in. I'm here with Em Burrows. Em, how you doing today?
Hello, I'm very well, thank you.
Fantastic. Are you ready to talk about apes?
I certainly am.
Because that's what we're all about here. We're doing our annual ape rundown right here on Talk the Talk. But before we get into that, Em, I believe you have a story for me that has been sent in by some of our listeners.
Well, I wanted to talk to you about wiki gnomes, partly because I just love the word wiki gnomes.
Isn't that a great term?
It's got this sort of cute little thing about it.
Let's explain what a gnome is, though. Because some Wikipedians, get into the hardcore editing.
This is the thing.
The content.
Exactly. So there are some people who go through, because of course public, members of the public can edit Wikipedia. So if they think that something, if a fact is wrong or something's written wrongly or that sort of thing, then they can go in and make these changes or submit the changes. So yeah, these gnomes, take it upon themselves to look at Wikipedia pages and kind of edit, but they get a little bit obsessive about it or something like that.
Are you thinking of a certain gnome?
Take it upon themselves. Well, look, there's this one guy and his handle is Giraffe Data. That's what he calls himself.
Yep.
And I need to find his actual name. I don't have it off the top of my head. But anyway, we can find that.
I think that's Brian Henderson.
Brian Henderson.
Yes.
Brian Henderson really, really dislikes the phrase comprised of. Mm-hmm. And so he has spent a great deal of time going through, poring over Wikipedia pages and removing or replacing that little phrase, comprised of.
What does he say instead?
I think he says composed. Does he say composed of or something?
Composed of is one way you could do it. You could also say, that something comprises. 50 states comprise the United States of America.
Yeah.
But according to him, you shouldn't say, the United States is comprised of 50 states. Yeah.
It's almost like, yes, it obviously particularly bothers him. He's taken it upon himself to be a little bit of a grammar kind of vigilante.
Yes, and it seems that according to this article on Medium, which I was forwarded by a bunch of people, including listeners Brett, Claire, and Ed Brown from Science on Top, which is a
great.
Terrific podcast, and you might even hear me on a couple of episodes. Anyway, Giraffe Data, or Mr. Giraffe Data, has done this 47,000 times.
That's unbelievable. 47,000 edits.
He gets a script that pops up all the pages that say comprised of, and he just changes it to comprises.
And on the one hand, I think good for him. That's power to the people, good effort. On the other hand, I think get a life.
Well, you know what? I hate to say this, but the entire internet is a waste of time. So I hesitate to call out people for their choice of hobby. That's something that people can do. What bothers me, I think, is, and this is just one thing that I've noticed from talking about language and learning about language, is that the more you know about language and how language really works, the less likely you are to be funny about it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Okay. Linguists are descriptive. We describe how language works, and we don't say that you should do this or do that, because people are going to, first of all, ignore you anyway.
Yeah.
And then they're just going to, language changes and language goes on. But you get people who they take a different view. They are linguistic prescriptivists.
Right.
And Mr. Giraffe Data is a big-time prescriptivist. And so what happens is that these prescriptivists who tell us what we should be doing with language, they're the people that know the least about how language works.
Right.
Okay, so the interesting thing is that Mr. Giraffe Data has written a 6,000-word manifesto for why comprised of is wrong. Now, David Shariat-Mandari of The Guardian has done a pretty good takedown explaining why Mr. Giraffe Data is all wet. But do you want to hear his reasons?
Yes, yeah, please.
You can tell me what you think of this.
Yeah, okay.
He says that you shouldn't use comprised of because it's completely unnecessary. There are lots of other ways to say that, and so you should use them instead.
Okay.
Seems like...
That doesn't seem that... Yeah, okay. That's not so strong, that one.
It seems like there are a lot of ways to say everything, but that doesn't mean we have cars and automobiles.
That's right.
Yeah. Anyway. Another one. It's illogical for a word to mean two opposite things. Sounds pretty good.
Okay.
But then you think about language, and there are lots of words in English that actually mean the opposite thing. So, for example, the word trim. When you trim something... Are you taking away from something by cutting it, or are you adding to it like a Christmas tree? You trim the tree.
Oh, yes, of course. I've forgotten that one. Yeah, right.
Same deal with clip and clip. Clipping could mean clipping, say, like detaching something, but it also could mean fastening something.
Yes.
And there are lots of words. Sometimes they're called Janus words because the Roman god Janus had two faces that faced in opposite directions. So Janus words are, like, for example, sanction could mean to approve of something, or it could mean to disapprove so much.
Right.
Yeah. So
fascinating.
There's a lot of
Isn't that
words.
good?
What else? The etymology of the word does not support comprised of, which is ridiculous. Etymology is the story.
Where does it come from? Yeah, I don't know where.
No, I should have looked that one up. But if you want to appeal to the original meanings of words, that's not the only meaning that a word can have. I mean, if that were the case, the word protocol would only mean the first page that's stuck to the cover of the book. Right?
Yeah.
So,
and I was going to say, it doesn't allow for kind of evolution or anything, really, does it? It's not. Yeah.
Precisely. That was his next thing. It's new. This is a new usage, so we shouldn't do it. Well, first of all, it's not very new. He says it's imprecise. If you're speaking a language that's totally precise and unambiguous, I don't know which language you're speaking, but it's not English.
Yeah.
All right. Human languages are imprecise. So he's got all these reasons for why it's wrong, but there's one thing that prescriptivists always seem to do when they explain their reasons for disliking the way that we use language. They always make the same mistakes themselves.
Yeah.
Okay. So I took a look through his 6,000 word screed, and did you know, I noticed a few things. I noticed how he says, he used the word amateur. He says, these readers may consider the occurrence of a phrase in Wikipedia as evidence that it's written by amateurs and not a respectable work. Well, I have to tell you, Mr. Giraffe Data, amateur in its original sense meant a lover. Wikipedia is written by lovers. So the etymology of the word doesn't support amateurs, but he goes ahead and uses it anyway. What's another one? He says, some people say that comprised of has a different meaning, but I hesitate to mention it because none of those people who say this have enunciated what the unique meaning is. Enunciated?
That doesn't sound quite right, does it?
Because it means something else.
Yeah.
What can you?
Well, I mean, I think he's looking for something more to do with sort of explaining it than kind of, clarifying it, or...
I think he means elucidated.
Yeah,
that's what I was thinking. Enunciated is okay with me. But if you're going to be a pest about it, then, it refers specifically to speaking etymologically. And so it breaks Mr. Giraffe Data's rules for grammar hygiene. And on it goes. Revert, he says that sometimes editors revert my edits. Well, in the 1300s, revert meant to become conscious again, to regain your senses. Right? In the 1500s, then it meant to improve in condition. So revert in our sense, to put something back the way it was, wouldn't come into being until 1856.
Wow.
So, is that new enough for Mr. Giraffe Data? So I just think it's an odd sort of bugbear that he has. And, people like to have their funny little grammar things. But I think if we really understand how language works, we realize that language is conventional. It is what people do. And if lots of people do a thing, then that's an okay way to do it. Just to finish this topic up, two of the key findings from the science of linguistics tell us that it's normal for language to change, and it's normal for people to use language differently from each other, and that includes Mr. Giraffe Data.
Here.
Giraffe Data.
Yeah.
Many thanks to our terrific listeners for sending us this, Brett, Claire, and Ed. Do you feel like a bit of Runner?
Oh, yes. I love Runner. They're great.
I actually do, too. One of our fine local musical bands in the Perth area. And this is the title track from their album, Cloud Kingdom, on RTR FM 92.1. Runner with Cloud Kingdom on RTR-FM 92.1. Lovely track.
I love Runner. Yeah, they're great. Really good.
Just got a phone call from Mark. What was Mark having to say?
Well, Mark was from England, and he said he noticed a lot of Australians use the word furthest, and it bothers him a little.
Like, you mean like if we went to the furthest point?
Yeah, it was the furthest away or something like that. Yeah.
Now, there's a really interesting name for that, and it's called the old double superlative.
Ah, yes, because further and furthest.
Right.
So it's kind of been combined into one word.
Further is comparative, and furthest is superlative. You say if it's the furthest, then you're doing the old double superlative. Not very fashionable in English, I have to say.
Yep.
But remember, if everyone does it, that's what it is. It is what it is. However, what's another example? When people say it's the bestest. That was the bestest one. It does sound a bit like a kid is saying.
I was going to say, little kids say that, don't they? That sort of thing, yeah.
Kind of a bit. So, if you want your speech not to be distracting, then don't use it. Although once again, people think that linguists are like, language police or language Nazis. We're not.
Yep.
We're language hippies. Right?
Oh, that's nice. I like that.
It's all cool, man. You just do whatever you do because it's probably, legal somewhere.
I was about to say, the only difference is that you've got, a whole stack of adjectives for cool under your belt.
Exactly. You can be cool. You can be hip. When it was hip to be hip, I was hip.
Hip's great, yeah. I love that.
Hey, I had a chat recently with Ben Ainsley about apes and whether they are getting close to language or not. And do you have an opinion? We talked a little bit about this.
I don't know much about it other than just the sign language stuff that we sort of talked about. It's hard to know, isn't it, whether it's just sort of rote learned and then it's that sort of Pavlovian type response thing, like you do something and you get a response, so you keep doing it. How much of it is that and how much of it is communication per se of a different sort?
That is the essence of the problem. I mean, how do we know? The mind is a black box. But I wasn't focusing so much on ape signs for this one. Instead, what happens is when I notice ape stuff, I stick it in a folder, and then a big ape story came out this week. So I thought, it's time to do ape rundown. So I talked about it with Ben, and so here's how that went. Now, remember, if you have any comments about what you hear, you can always get them to us, and we might read them out on the air. How do they reach us, Em?
Studio@rtrfm.com.au. That's the email address. And you can give us a call, 9260-9210. And you've got Twitter.
Yes, we're at TalkRTR, and you can also reach us on our Facebook page, or just head over to our blog, www.talkthettalkpodcast.com.
Do apes have accents? A recent news story claims that chimps learn a new language when they move in with other chimps. What's behind the story, and what exactly are our fellow primates capable of, language-wise, that is? Linguist Daniel Midgley goes ape on this episode of Talk the Talk. Word. What's the monkey word for word?
I think it's a bit of a misnomer to say that there's a monkey word for something so abstract as a word, don't you think?
I suppose so.
Maybe not words for word. That would take a bit of reflection that I think only humans really end up doing.
So far, but we're getting ahead of ourselves.
Uh-oh.
Daniel?
Yes?
Tell me of matters linguistic in the world in the past week.
Well, there's a bit of a kerfuffle over Google Translate.
Oh, Google Translate, you scamp. What have you been up to this week?
I love Google Translate. I really do.
I think they do. Look, with the accumulated power and resources that Google have, they're doing some pretty good work.
And machine translation is a really tough task.
Super hard. We've done several different shows that deal with this, and the end result is always really hard.
Difficult. Yeah. Well, consider one of the difficulties of machine translation, and that is the problem of synonyms, or should I say near synonyms? Since I'm not really sure that there is such a thing as exact synonyms.
Right.
Two words, even though they refer to the same thing, could
carry
differ.
Very different meanings depending on context and all sorts of other things.
Different connotations, and so, a car is not the same as an automobile.
Right.
Well, it seems that Google Translate, when they have been serving up their translations, have been submitting to users some slightly less than optimal words that maybe we wouldn't want to use.
Come on, lay it on us. So wait, just to be clear, you're talking about people from languages other than English asking for English translations of things?
Let's say that there's a Spanish person who is trying to translate stuff into English, and they ask Google Translate, how you say homosexual?
Right.
And it says, there are lots of words that you can use. For example,
look how helpful I can be.
Homosexual,
great.
Gay.
Yep, certainly useful.
Camp.
Fine.
By the way, do you know why it's called camp?
I used to know this. But remind me.
Comes from French camper, to portray or to pose. That's one idea.
Okay.
It is probably not true that it comes from the gay dudes that would follow soldiers around to their camp.
One of those classic sort of like urban myth etymology stories.
Remember that if it's too interesting, it's probably not true. The other words that Google Translate suggests are not so nice. They are words that have been used to hurt people.
Oh, I can see where this is going.
Things like poof,
ouch,
and queen, and faggot.
Oh, dear.
Yeah, Google Translate.
That's not the best. So has Google responded?
Yes, they were contacted by a campaign group called All Out, who noticed the problem, and Google responded to the issue really fast. And they noticed that the problem was coming from crowdsourced data, so they were just picking up on bad attitudes from normal people.
Right.
So they've corrected that, and in fact, we have to note that Google has been pretty good about LGBT issues in the past. So it's certainly not intentional. It's just one of the hazards that happens when you get a computer to follow the data, when a computer is so dumb about context and connotation.
So when they end up taking over the world, they're going to be like my sort of like older Uncle Larry who just comes from a different time and doesn't realize the things that he's saying are as offensive as they are.
It's even better than that. They'll come from all different times. They'll just be saying terms with no idea where they're from, and we can laugh at them.
In one sentence, it'll be Scarlet Jezebel. In another sentence, it'll be slurry. It'll just be all over the place.
I can't wait.
Okay, well, now that we've successfully dobbed on Google to all of our listeners, why don't we take a track before we get stuck into some monkeys?
Let's try Happy by Fisher Spooner.
You're on RTR FM 92.1, the Sound Alternative. Ben and Daniel with you for Talk the Talk, and we'll be back right after this.
Happy by Fisher Spooner on RTR-FM 92.1.
Ben and Daniel with you for Talk the Talk, our weekly exploration of matters linguistic. And this week, we're talking monkeys.
I love getting into what apes and monkeys and chimps and primates can do with language.
So do I, because it reminds me how I'm the top of the pyramid.
We're a branch on the tree. I don't know if we're the top of the pyramid.
The tallest branch.
No,
top of the tree.
We gotta stop thinking about that.
So we're talking about whether the simians can language, right?
Well, okay. I think we already know that they're not doing language, and that's okay. But people who write headlines treat them as though they are. And this bugs me.
You can just basically distrust every headline ever because it is designed to do nothing more than to make you click on a thing, right?
Yes, and at the expense of accuracy. Can I just read you some headlines?
Lay 'em on me.
From CBBC, I think this is the kids' version of BBC. Chimps develop Scottish accents.
Okay, nope.
How about this from ABC Science? Chimps have own dialects, in quotes, but can learn others.
Also not true.
NBC, this is in the USA. Chimps learn new language when they change locale.
Okay, that doesn't sound like a thing that's happening.
You can see how people take the words relating to language and dialect and accent and just sort of apply them willy-nilly. But remember that for a linguist, these terms mean something different. So those three all relate to the same story.
Right. And so the story behind the story is what?
The real story comes from Stuart Watson and team, and this is from a paper published in Current Biology. Now, there was a group of chimpanzees that were transferred from the Netherlands to Edinburgh, Scotland. Right. Okay. The Dutch chimps, can I say Dutch chimps? For the sake of brevity, I'm just... and then there's the Scottish chimps.
Henceforth referred to as the Dutch chimps and the Scottish chimps.
Okay. The Dutch chimps really liked apples.
Okay. Fair enough.
Well, the Scottish chimps didn't like them so much, though.
Okay, interesting. Weird, but
they were
whatever.
Kind of
the Scots have very interesting take on food in general.
Are you doing that anthropomorphic fallacy thing?
I'm just saying that the Scottish have really bad food.
They're just chimps, Ben.
Yeah, but they clearly like different things, and
we don't know
they're
why.
In Scotland, so clearly it's the Scots' fault.
Oh, it's not the Scottishness. it's something about the chimps.
So the Dutch chimps liked apples, Scotch chimps did not like apples.
And you could tell the Dutch chimps liked them because when you offer them apples, they would make a noise that sounded like this.
That sounds like an excited monkey.
That was a monkey by the name of Freck, and he was giving a high squeaky sound of delight. The Scottish chimps would make a much lower pitched sort of sound, and the authors of the paper think that this was referential, that they intended to refer to apples, that was almost kind of, not quite, but almost kind of like their word for apple.
Right, okay, so the Scottish chimps made a similar but slightly different noise.
Much lower.
Okay.
Now, the chimps lived together for 3 years.
Okay, the Scottish chimps and the Dutch chimps.
And to the point where they were just basically chimps, just hanging out. They mixed in their social groups and everything. After 3 years, that same chimp, Freck, sounded like this.
Oh, yeah, he's coughing low.
Much lower. And this was the case for all the Dutch chimps. And they still liked apples just as much. It wasn't that they'd gone off apples, because they would still choose them in preference tests.
Right.
But the vocalizations for apples changed to match others in their community.
There you go. Changed accents. Hands down. Dialects. Yep, absolutely. All those clickbait titles were right. That's exactly what happened.
I think it's a little more complicated than that.
Why you always got to linguist it up and be boring?
Because it's complicated. So what this tells us is that there's some social element of accommodation in their vocalization. And that's really interesting for us because, we split off from chimpanzees somewhere between 7 and 13 million years ago. They've got it. We've got it. Somehow it must have been in our mutual common ancestor.
Okay.
But this is one way of explaining, why do I swear more when I'm around swearing people? Or why do I talk the way that people do at work? And the answer is that we
Because
accommodate.
monkeys have accents.
No.
What? Sorry. No.
Because we accommodate and we're used to speaking like people that we are near. One last one. The headline here from ABC Science is, Chimps talk about favorite fruits, best trees. This research comes from Amy Kalan of the Max Planck Institute for Evolutionary Anthropology, published in the journal Animal Behavior. They looked at wild chimpanzees in the Taï forest of the Ivory Coast, and they found that these chimps eat a lot of fruit from the nauclica tree. Have you ever seen one of these?
No.
Looks a lot like a rambutan, but it's like softer and more flowery.
Okay.
They found that there was a relationship between the high pitch or low pitch when the monkeys were referring to these fruits and the size of the tree.
Oh, okay, so lower, bigger?
How did you know?
Strangely enough, I thought back to the previous show where we talked about how there was certain aspects of vocalization in humans where if you said to people of different language groups nonsense words and asked them to describe what they would associate them with, like if you said kippy kippy and bow bow, that people across languages would say, well, the kippy kippy is like a tiny sharp thing and the bow bow is like a large round thing.
Yep.
And so I kind of assumed that the monkeys were doing the same thing.
It is exactly the same thing. And isn't it funny that they would have the same kinds of tendencies as we would, in a way?
Evolution. Da, 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 da.
Very strange. Remember that some linguists disagree. They would say that they're not referring to things at all, but just giving an unconscious response to a situation which then we interpret as words.
But that's just as interesting because even if it's an unconscious response to something, it suggests that there's a commonality.
So not only across the human species, but for other species as well.
Wow.
Very interesting.
Now we need to do some research of some mammals that are not monkeys and apes to see how far away this goes. Like, do dolphins do it? Do otters do it? Do bears do it?
I think I registered a response in that paramecium.
Yeah. Or it's wiggling its, what are they called? Flagellae?
Yes. There it goes. Look at it. I think what this really tells us is that chimps can use sounds to refer to things in the world, which is very languagey.
Yep.
And the reference that chimps use vary in the same ways as the reference that we use.
Right.
Which is cool.
They might not have language, but they're pretty darn interesting nonetheless. Why don't we take another track?
Let's go with the Panics, Monkeys in the Hallway.
You're on RTRFM 92.1, a nice local band for you, and Ben and Daniel will be back with you right after this.
Panics there, with Monkeys in the Hallway on RTRFM 92.1.
If you're just tuning in, Ben and Daniel with you for Talk the Talk, where we investigate things of a linguistic bent. And this week we're talking about monkeys and apes and the funny noises that they make. So what other sorts of things do they do that is like us?
They do a lot of interesting things with vocalizations, and I've got 3 different things that I'm just going to run through really fast. This one comes from Rachel Morrison of Hunter College, New York, published in Zoo Biology. It has to do with whispering.
Ooh.
She observed cotton-top tamarins. They're very cute.
They are the most adorable of monkeys.
And they were in New York City's Central Park Zoo, which is one of the coolest places in the world.
It's true.
Now, there was this one keeper that the cotton-top tamarins did not like.
Oh, had said keeper done something to earn the ire of the monkey peoples?
He'd been involved in the capture of the tamarins.
I see.
Usually what happens is that they make a what they call a mobbing sound. But they found that when this one guy was around, the monkeys wouldn't do their mobbing sound. They would instead whisper.
Oh, no way. They would totally...
I hate that guy.
Hey, Steve. Yeah, Ted. It's that douche over there. Oh, God, I hate that guy.
That guy's a jerk.
I was just sitting in my tree, man. Mind my own business. He comes up and snatches me.
Shut up. He'll hear you.
Okay.
They were clearly trying to keep something out of his hearing.
You see why I say the things that I say?
I understand. It's very tempting.
Would it not make sense if you perceived a person as a predator.
Yes.
Which I think these monkeys probably pretty comfortably do. That you wouldn't want to make a lot of noise around a predator lest you earn their attention.
Not making noise is a good way to stay alive in the presence of predators. Here's another one from Dr. Thor Bergman from the University of Michigan in the U.S., published in Crimp Biology. This one is making a gobbling sound.
So we're talking about turkeys?
No, this is an ape called the gelada. It's very much like a baboon.
Okay.
It's been observed to make a gurgling noise. Here's how it sounds, and you should ignore the high-pitched noise, because that's something else going on. But listen to kind of a gobble sound.
That is weird.
Other apes don't do that, but the gelada does.
That sounds a little creepily human.
Just a little bit. Other people who have researched geladas, they hear that noise and they say, "Who's talking to?" Oh, it's just one of the apes.
Right, because it does. It sounds like a very, I don't know if it's a mechanics thing, but it sounds like the mechanics operating of a human mouth, teeth, and tongue.
And it may be a point of similarity with our own vocal tract.
Ah.
And then there's a wild-born orangutan named Tilda. This research comes from Adriana Lamiera from the University of Amsterdam. This is a female orangutan living in Cologne Zoo in Germany, and she's figured out how to get attention by making clicking vocalizations. Let's hear them.
That sounds really fun.
Yeah, it does. And you're very good. Yeah.
I could be a really good orangutan.
Yeah, but it wouldn't be very good because other orangutans don't do this.
Oh, I'd be all out on my lonesome.
Tilda only learned it because she had a keeper who made clicking sounds and whistling sounds, but the amazing thing was that she was able to duplicate it.
Right.
So what this all tells us is that, first of all, apes are vocally very dexterous, more so than we had heretofore thought.
Right.
And the other thing is that these apes are capable of learning sounds not in their repertoire, and they can tailor their vocalizations to what's going on in the environment. And finally, there's some research from Karel von Schaik of the University of Zurich, published in PLOS ONE. Wild orangutans have been observed calling out their travel plans.
So I'm going to stop by the really big tree with the good fruit, and then I figure I'll just go get some coffee beans because they're just growing wild. It's going to be really nice.
Male orangutans make these resonating long calls in a certain direction.
Okay.
And then they were observed to travel in that direction.
It sounds like such a quintessentially male thing to do, doesn't it?
I'm going over there!
Seriously. And then you go over there and you're like, oh, all right, I'm here now. Hey, what's over there? I'm going over there!
Another interesting thing, though, was the reaction of other orangutans. Males who were in the path of this approaching orangutan would sort of get out of the way, whereas females would, come closer.
Oh,
right?
Interesting. So it's like, I'm going to be over in this direction. Any hot ladies wanting for some action, you just be on down there. And any male orangutans, you better get the hell out.
I think I'm just going to go over there for a while.
I'm just, you know what? He sounds kind of big. I
think I'm going to sit this one out. So what this tells us is that orangutans seem to be able to make plans and to communicate them. That is really languagey. I mean, being able to form plans and goals and being able to infer the goals and plans of others, that might be one of the things that kicked off language in the first place.
So what we're talking about here is precognition, is forethought.
We're talking about communicating plans and goals.
And that's really interesting because one thing animals and language are very, very not great at is being able to think about a time frame outside of the current. So a lot of animals are not fantastic at being, one of the key markers of language is about having abstract ideas.
Yeah.
And so what these orangutans are doing is actually, in a very slight way, having an abstract thought, which is, in a while, which is the abstract part, I'm going to be elsewhere.
And, sometimes it was up to 20, 21, 22 hours later.
That's huge.
That's a long time.
That's a really big time.
This is a cavalcade of research about our primate friends. We love the idea of talking to the animals and imagining what they would say. But for me, the interesting thing is what we can infer about the evolutionary path we've taken. Like, what did we know and when did we know it? These discoveries can serve as signposts to when we acquired certain languagey traits. There's one more thing I'd like to get across, and that is I'd like to encourage a bit of skepticism. When you see news stories about how apes either speak a language or use words or have dialects, be skeptical.
And the last thing that I'd add, whenever we talk about the subject, we always go, be skeptical, animals don't language, but the things that they do are no less interesting for it.
They're really, really cool. And I can respect an approach that says, you know what, they're not doing language, but let's see what they can do.
Indeed. There's never a bad answer where you dig under a rock that you haven't looked under yet.
Yeah, I think so too.
A track?
Since we've been talking about calls, let's hear Recall by Tom Ellard.
On RTRFM 92.1 The Sound Alternative, we will be back with the word of the week right after this track.
That's Recall by Tom Ellard. That's his brand new one. The album's called Rhine.
So, word of the week, what do we got?
We've had a big show on Words of the Year, and now Macquarie Dictionary has announced its Word of the Year.
Fantastic, the Australian Dictionary. Great,
Yeah.
I'm so excited. What's it going to be?
You ready?
Yep.
Mansplaining.
Boo. Boo.
Weren't-
Such a boring word.
Weren't we talking about this a couple of years ago?
Oh, my God.
I guess
Such
we...
a typically Australian thing to do as well, like jump on the bandwagon from like 3 seasons of excitement gone.
It's embarrassing, isn't it? I think we could explain that by the fact that this was voted on by Macquarie fans.
Oh, so it's the public who are to blame.
But I think that just means that more people who like Macquarie stuff need to listen to us because we have been on this.
Man, you would have been so across this. You would have seen that on the voting thing and been like, what? I'm not voting for a word from 3 years ago. That's lame.
There were a lot of other great words. In particular, the man prefix showed up in another word, mandals.
Mandals?
Which are like sandals for men.
Okay, hang on. What are we talking about when we say sandals?
Here's the description. A type of sandal designed for men, usually black or brown leather with a thick sole.
So when I was growing up in the northwest of Western Australia, we called them reefies.
Oh, right.
Because they were made by a company called Reef, and you would use them for walking on reefs.
Okay.
Which you couldn't really do with thongs because they keep floating off your foot, right? Look, I don't think they've ever really not been for men, but if you're wearing them, you're a massive dag. There's just no two ways about it. They are very uncool.
What are you talking about?
Come on, Daniel. Name me a cool person that you have seen who is wearing sandals.
All right, you've got a point. But if I throw in the pair of socks...
that's next level bad.
Then it wraps around to cool.
No.
No?
No. That is, I would argue that the sock and sandal combination is one of maybe 4 or 5 things in the known fashion universe that even hipsters will not wear, ironically.
That's why we've got to do it. Other words that came up in the voting that I also liked, jelly.
What?
Meaning jealous.
Uh-huh. Well, that's old as well.
Jelly of me. Yes, it comes from the U.S. in the 1970s. Voluntold.
Voluntold?
I was voluntold to show up at this meeting. Somebody volunteered me.
Right.
And finally, a feel-pinion.
A feel-pinion.
An opinion based on one's personal experiences, intuitions, or feelings rather than on research, analysis, and fact. Closely related to truthiness.
I quite like a feel-pinion.
That's just my feel-pinion.
Hey, my feel-pinion as well.
I try not to have feel-pinions myself. I try to make sure that what I say and think is backed up by evidence, but I'm sure I've got some feel-pinions back there.
Oh, yeah, certainly. I think everyone does, and I think there's a measure of humanity in it, but there's also a measure of good humanity in trying to identify when it's happening. There are some things, however, that my feel-pinions will never be combated out for.
The socks and sandals?
Scrabble.
You make fun of me
I
for
have
still
bad feel-pinions about Scrabble that will never go away.
You mock me for still playing Words with Friends.
Oh, you brought that up. Words with Friends was this like flash-in-the-pan thing, and only you and apparently every other person who plays it in the world plays it with you is still playing Words with Friends. No one else does that.
There are many of us. And I'm challenging you, listener.
Ooh, open challenge.
If you want to find me, my username is Fontor.
And to think I made fun of you already without knowing that bit.
Yes.
So much more fun making to be had.
I will find you, and I will beat you. No, wait. You will find me, and then I will beat you.
Okay, that's it. Open challenge. I want to see if we've got some listeners out there who can go to town on Daniel. I would like to think that we do. I think I have a lot of respect for our listeners. I think there's someone out there who can lay the smack down.
I think there's someone out there who might try.
Ooh. P.S. Ooh. That's it. Gauntlet thrown, listeners. I think someone needs to take Daniel and spank him with some digital Scrabble pieces.
I am looking forward to it.
Excellent. Well, with that in mind, shall we not play you out into your inevitable doom?
This is a wonderful track since we're talking about feels and feel pinions. This comes originally from a 70s band called Starbuck. It was their one hit, and it's a wonderful track called Moonlight Feels Right. Except that this version comes from Yukira Takashi of Yellow Magic Orchestra.
Another wonderful experience with you, Daniel, as always.
I've enjoyed it very much.
Until next week.
See you then. Moonlight Feels Right with Yukito Takashi on RTR FM 92.1. Wasn't that an enjoyable slice of 70s AM?
Yes, and the marimba, was it marimba?
It was a marimba.
The marimba chops were just out of this world. I've never heard that, except for maybe in Toto.
You don't often hear a marimba solo like that. I'm glad that you mentioned that for reasons that will become clear a little later.
Yeah.
So that was a chat I had recently with Ben Ainsley about apes and how the things that they're doing are kind of close to language, but not really, but kind of, in a cool way. We're coming at you from Studio A of RTR-FM headquarters, Mount Lawley. I'm here with Em Burrows.
Hello.
We had a bit of an update on jelly, by the way.
Oh, yes, yep.
Yeah, because we mentioned that jealous has become jelly. Well, I was riding to the studios this morning, looking over people's shoulders at their tabloids, and I found it has shrunken further. I saw gel.
Yeah.
And here it is. Ashley is well gel of Brittany's new boyfriend.
Totes gel.
Totes gel. So jealous has become jelly, has become gel. The pace of change is truly dizzying. Makes me feel...
It really is hard to keep up. You really have to sort of, make a conscious effort almost to try and be aware of new words and things.
Thanks to everyone who called in. I just want to run through a few things here. Philip asked us, what's the deal with prepositions at the end of a sentence? You're not supposed to do it. Have you heard that rule?
I certainly have, yes. In fact, I worked for a school principal. I was a Year 7 teacher, and I worked for a principal who made it very clear that prepositions at the end of sentence were not acceptable in school reports.
So we're talking about words like of,
exactly,
and on.
Yeah, with whatever, and then proceeded to send out a memo.
Yes.
And I can't remember. I wish I could remember precisely what I said, but it ended with a preposition, and we all went, "Oh,
see,
raw."
This is the thing. Whenever you're a prescriptivist, you try to tell people what not to do. But Philip was saying, well. This is a rule that I heard when I was younger, and then he and I sat down and we started trying to think of ones like, where are you from? And we thought, no, that actually sounds normal. And we started just thinking of a whole bunch of sentences that had prepositions at the end, and every one of them just sounded fine.
Yeah.
So if you want to know more about that one, check out our show, Bad English with Am and Shay. It's a few episodes back, but that is pretty much just a made-up rule. Nobody really does that.
Yeah, no, and I think, saying things like, with whom did you go to the film or something, doesn't sound current, does it? It's old-fashioned.
Formal.
Yeah, it does, yeah.
Yeah, it really does. So thanks to Philip for that. Shane on Twitter at SMDay. Hi, Shane. He says, is disorientated a word? Opinion? Do you have a feel opinion on that?
Do I have a feel opinion? My feel opinion is that I would probably say disoriented.
I would too.
Okay.
And yet...
I'm not quite sure why, I just would.
It's not surprising for words to acquire extra morphemes. For example, and I've used this example before, how do you feel about the word jeopardize?
I don't use it that much, actually, to be honest.
Okay, well, if you went back 150, 200 years, you'd find people peeving on jeopardize because you weren't supposed to say it. You were supposed to say jeopard.
Oh, right.
I don't mean to jeopard your chances of success. But for some reason, people stuck on the I's, and now we think nothing of it.
No.
So in 50, 100 years, people are going to say disorientated, and they'll think nothing of it either, and that's just what happens.
Yeah.
David pointed out a thing that Australians do. Is it the thing that Australians do? People seem to think it's a thing that Australians do, and that's saying hot as, making a comparison, but leaving off the last bit.
Hot as... something
as.
We don't know. Just hot as.
Hot as. Is it an oven? Is it hell?
Oh, that's funny.
There is a difference. It's hot as. In fact, David even said that he sometimes pulls up people and says, hot as what? And they respond, just hot as.
Just hot as, yeah.
I like to call these not unfinished symphonies, but unfinished similes.
Oh, that's nice. I like
nice?
that. That's very good, yes.
Dave emails us on studio at rtrfm.com.au. He says, your talk on evolution of language got me thinking. I've noticed recently there seems to be more and more use of the phrase in sentences, particularly on radio. It's almost more common these days than hearing like, Do you hear this?
I use like and I'm afraid. I think I use both of them.
I think it's becoming more popular. I don't have any stats on this, but I mean, sometimes we do need to have a floor holder, something to hold the floor so that someone doesn't jump in and steal your turn, right?
Ah, that's interesting.
You got an air pocket in the brain. You don't want to be silent because then if somebody, if you're silent, then somebody might think it's their turn and jump in and grab it, and then you have to do this thing where you go, oh, no, go ahead. No, you go ahead. It's so boring and awful.
Yeah, but there's also, I was just thinking then, the word in it. You know, it gets, because that has a similar thing where it gets put on the end of a sentence, but it doesn't mean isn't it? It's not. It's sort of just put there.
Could
so
mean,
I went to the I went to the park in it. It's just a sort of
and it means
tacked on the end.
Didn't I or couldn't you?
Or something.
Wouldn't she?
So I suppose could have a similar usage on the end of something.
I think that in it is a really great thing.
I love it. Yeah, I think in it's really good.
Remember that lots of languages, like for example, Japanese just has ne. Right?
Yes.
That's just one thing for everything.
Desu ne.
We have to do this thing where we say, oh, well, what was the verb? You know, oh, it was could. Okay, now I have to turn it from positive to negative, and then I have to put the pronoun on there. Didn't she? Couldn't you?
Well, I used to work with Aboriginal kids as well, and the word they used at the end of sentences was ana.
Oh, yeah.
And it's similar to me. It felt similar to in it.
Precisely.
I'm going down here, Anna. Do this,
That's
Anna.
good.
Yeah.
There's one more thing that I wanted to throw in, and this is a wonderful sentence. You know, we've had a bit of a leadership squabbling in one of our major political parties in Australia.
Yeah. The spill.
The spill. And this was tweeted by Ben Harris Rojas. He says, this perfectly sums up the spill and the coverage of it for me. Here's the headline, and it was in the Sydney Morning Herald, and this is legit because they put it on Google Plus too. Prime Minister Tony Abbott has repeatedly refused to deny claims his deputy Julie Bishop has refused to promise she would not challenge him for the leadership.
I cannot keep up with what's happening in that sentence.
This is just an awful sentence. It's a well, here, I'm going to break it down for you. You know about Julie Bishop not challenging Abbott for the leadership?
Yes.
She refused to promise that. But you know what about that? Tony Abbott could have denied the claims that she refused, but he refused. Does that help?
No. There are too many negatives and, all those kind of things.
We are terrible at unwinding these sentences because in English, if you flip the polarity more than twice, we start getting really lost and confused. Hey, thanks so much to everyone for calling in and giving us a great show today with your questions. I love it. Remember, we are always available. You can find old shows on www.talkthetalkpodcast.com. And I think we're going to be back next week. Will you join me?
Most definitely.
Well, then we'll see you then. See you next Tuesday.
See you then.
In the words of Christopher Pine.
This has been an RTRFM podcast. RTRFM is an independent community radio station that relies on listeners for financial support. You can subscribe online at rtrfm.com.au/subscribe.
You can also subscribe to Talk the Talk on iTunes and even leave us a review. Follow us on Twitter at TalkRTR. Email us on talkthetalk@rtrfm.com.au. And find all our episodes on our blog, www.talkthetalkpodcast.com.
The marimba solo in that song absolutely makes it a sandals and socks moment.
You didn't like the marimba solo?
No, I loved it, but there is no doubt in my mind that a person who wears sandals and socks would have gone, oh man, what a great marimba solo.
I said what a great marimba solo.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the thing is, I feel like on this show this time, there have been like 3 or 4 things that have marked me out as a total dork.
I'm sorry,
show.
Fontour. What was that? I can't quite hear you over the sound of you playing words with friends with people still.
You're going to call me that forever, aren't you?
Yep.